Welcome to the Furthermore podcast.
What's going on, everyone? You do not want to miss this. I'm doing a special episode. I am so happy to be with the esteemed comedian, Winston Hodges. Winston, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I like to see that your handwriting is as bad as mine. It looks all. Mine's actually worse. At least all your letters are the same size. That's my big problem.
I made most of the letters capital on purpose.
You did great. I like that they're all capitals except for the I's.
Yeah, because when I do equations, sometimes I get my I's mixed up with the L's, mixed up with the ones, and
that's totally fair, man.
Well, Winston, I am so happy to have you on. Everyone, I want you to stop what you're doing, drop everything you've got, and go to YouTube and search Grieving Productively. Please search Grieving Productively and watch Winston's comedy special. This is such an amazing special. I've personally never seen anything like it. I'm only a year into the comedy, and this was something super unique and super relevant. This special is it's called Grieving Productively. Winston, why don't you tell us about it a little bit?
Basically, I wanted to. The original plan was just to do a regular stand-up special, like just record 30 to 40 minutes at a club or a room back home with a big crowd and record it, and it would be like this cool memento and like remembrance of my father. But when COVID happened, I hadn't recorded it yet, so I kind of had to figure out how to get it done because I wanted it to be done in time for the 1-year anniversary of the passing away from my father from pancreatic cancer. Right. So literally I got the idea of like, all right, on the 1-year anniversary, I'll go to his grave and perform to him. I'll take all these old sets that I have. I had my first outdoor set pop up and they let me headline and told me I could do that material after I did my regular set. And then I was like, well, I mean, we met on Zoom. We've been doing a ton of Zoom comedy. Not everybody's been doing it. And I thought it would have been disingenuous to not admit that Zoom was also part of my grieving process. So I was like, I'm going to do a Zoom show and see if people come out. And then I just edited it all together and spent like what feels like 100 hours editing it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's basically the special. And there's a cool little after credits thing at the end. So I like it. I'm pretty proud of it.
Yeah, and I really like the fact that you plugged in the Zoom bits, and I also am a proponent for Zoom comedy. It's helped me grow. I'm only a little over a year into comedy. I find great use out of it to work on bits, to network.
The networking is like, I think, the most important part of it. And just the fact of like, there's literally, I'm doing outdoor shows now too. I know you're doing some in-person shows as well, but for me personally, I've been doing comedy about 5.5 years. If I had just taken a year off and not done any Zoom or anything like that, for me personally, I probably would have quit comedy. I need to fill my time with something so bad. And the networking's been great, man. It's just like gotten to do a bunch of podcasts off of this. I've gotten to meet a bunch of comics like that are like local to me. And also when everything goes back to normal, I mean, you and I both, I think we've met people where if you're out of town, we now have places to stay. We have people that can help us get on shows. And I get that it is not as much fun and as good as an in-person show, but I am a proponent that it is better than doing nothing at all.
Yes, precisely. And I think that's what's going to get us through this pandemic, which is not quite over yet. And, the Zoom mics, they have their place in my mind. So
I agree.
Yes. Again, everyone, I'm going to say this several times, like, stop what you're doing, including watching this podcast. Watch Grieving Productively on YouTube.
And then come back to the podcast.
Yeah, and then
I like that. This is stop. We'll pause for an hour, and you gotta watch it and come back, please.
Definitely. So I wanted to ask you. You brought up in the special that you're seeing a therapist, and I'm a big mental health advocate. Could you just talk about your perspective on mental health and comedy, just overall?
So I think that therapy is the single most important thing that people can do. That is where I'm at in my life. Right now, I'm not currently seeing my therapist because my therapist and I had a discussion that he was like, well, you're at a point where when you need something, contact me and we'll go from there. So
Gotcha.
That's where I'm at. And I felt really good to get to that point. I might go back pretty soon to going every week because I I don't know. I have a great relationship with my therapist. I love him. I think mental health is incredibly important. I think it's a thing that is increasingly ignored in most communities, which is upsetting to me. I used to be the type of person that thought, I'm not going to therapy because it means you're weak. I'm not going to therapy because it means there's something wrong with me. But I got into therapy actually 2 weeks before my dad went into the hospital. I had no idea he was going to get sick and go. And I can honestly say I was in there for a completely different reason, dealing with like past traumatic issues that I finally, people had talked me into, like, you have got to go to therapy for this because it's leading into negative aspects of your own life. And I finally started to go. And then my dad passed away when my third session happened. He had died the day before, and I went to my therapist, and that I think that being in therapy, I don't want to say saved my life because I wasn't in a position of where I was someone that would self-harm or anything like that. But it definitely helped me from being extremely self-destructive. It helped me deal with my depression. It helped me deal with my grief and my loss. And I actually have a podcast called Dead Dad Comedy Pod, where we bring people on that are dealing with grief and loss, and we talk about mental health a lot. And me and my co-host, Amber Hendricks, always tell people like, hey, you should at least try therapy. Even if you think you feel great, it's just mental health is incredibly important, especially in the comedy community, because a lot of people that are doing stand-up have gone through something traumatic, and although stand-up is very cathartic, I don't believe that doing stand-up should be your only form of therapy.
Yes, I agree. And I personally struggle with, I see a therapist now, but it took me a while to get there, largely because I think when I came to a point where I needed to see a therapist, I was essentially playing phone tag with all these providers.
I hated that. That's the worst.
It is. And it's, I was going to, and that's, I was going to ask you about that. Like, I had a certain insurance provider when I had a full-time day job a couple of years ago before I even started comedy. Now my parents are kind of helping me out with insurance, and as I'm like transitioning life-wise and like career-wise. But yeah, I mean, what was that like? Just like like playing phone tag and calling all these numbers and finding, a therapist?
Well, it was weird. So with my job at the time, I don't work there anymore because when I moved to DC, I'm just doing comedy full time, and then I'm doing some other things on the side that I'm in talks with to do that I'm pretty excited about. But like, I was teaching, and we did have insurance, and we did have some therapists that were in that network, but I had someone recommended to me that was a therapist that was not in my network, and so I just paid out of pocket, which is very difficult to do. It was very hard. I had to, especially on like a private school teaching like salary at like a nonprofit school for autism. I had to cut a lot of corners. I had to quit buying some things that I wanted to buy. I had to start taking gigs I didn't really want to take to get extra cash. But it was the best thing I could ever do. Tell me this, did you ever go to a therapist you hated? Because that happened to me the first time I went to therapy, because I didn't understand that you need to find a therapist that was good for you. I thought that oh, this is just what therapy is. Did you have to talk to go have multiple sessions with people? Because I feel like that's the biggest pushback of people. I don't want to have to find these people. I don't want to waste money on a session that sucks and then try to look for somebody.
I've definitely stopped seeing therapists after a solid 3 or 4 sessions. And it was more of knowing that I wouldn't be compatible. I've definitely had friends that have expressed strong dissonance, and they have hated their therapist. I don't know. It's I thankfully haven't had something that severe, but I've definitely switched your providers, and one therapist to another, one psychiatrist to another. And then it's I was actually going through different specialties and kind of seeing what.
Yeah. Trying to find out.
Yeah.
Because you have to find out what works for you. Right.
Right.
And that's the biggest pushback is the first therapist I got recommended was, so the one I liked, I got last year. I had actually gone to therapy a year and a half before that for one session. I went with this guy that got recommended by members of my family, and my family's pretty religious. I'm a Christian, but my family's also Christian. So they were the one that got recommended to was a biblically based therapist, and it just didn't work. The way he was talking to me wasn't helping me through my issues. And I don't begrudge him for that being what works for him. But I was I'm not ever going to therapy again. And then a year and a half later when I really needed to go, and my brother was like, hey, my friend used this guy, try him. And I went, I mean, his name's Dr. John Boyd. He's in Richmond, Virginia. And I can honestly say he was amazing. It was awesome. He's a hypnotherapist, which we didn't do a ton of hypnosis, but like just the actual therapy portion was great. The hypnosis portion was like, I'm not a guy that usually believes in like hypnosis or hypnotherapy, but I can honestly say the way that he explained it to me, that it's not a cure-all. It's not like, oh, I'm going to hypnotize you and you think you're a chicken. He's like, I'm just getting you relaxed so that you're comfortable talking about things that you might not normally be comfortable talking about. And when he explained it to me like that, he explained it to me like it was like meditation. So I basically had guided meditation with my therapist and then regular therapy sessions. And that worked for me as a dude with a lot of anxiety. I needed that.
Gotcha.
So, but that's my experience with it. But I will say, like, if there's anybody listening and you like hated your first therapist, it's like dating. You have to like go on a bunch of dates and find the one that like works for you and is in your budget, because you don't want a woman that's out of your budget or not in your taste. And you got to figure out what works for you.
Absolutely. And I think you spelled it out very simply, which was getting like a recommendation from a friend. I'm
Yes.
still working through my friendships, if you will, to have those kind of conversations. So I've kind of done the trial and error mostly on my own. And you know, I kind of realized I think it would be streamlined if I get recommendations to actually talk about this more openly with my close friend like circle.
Do your friend circle that's not comedians, do they talk about mental health often? Because I feel like in the comedy community, we at least talk about it or like make fun of going to therapy and stuff like that. But I was lucky being in a school setting where we had a bunch of support, and working at a school for autism where there's a lot of therapists coming in and out anyway. I was lucky that most of my friends are in therapy too, to be able to talk us through it. Have you seen that, or do you think that like, is that why it's so difficult for you, because they don't really talk about it that often?
I think that I have some friends that don't talk about it, and if they have sort of a concern, I'm usually their kind of go-to, maybe to guide them to certain resources. But even among the friends that I do talk about it with, I think it sometimes gets really open-ended on, and like maybe like the advocacy side, and sometimes I notice that I personally have a reluctance to talk about my own problems and my own issues and being vulnerable.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm the exact opposite. I am an open book, and it can be annoying.
Okay.
I'm very much like, I'm the type of friend that's like, I want friends that overshare, and I am going to overshare. Like, that's the type of support that I need. Or at least I can compartmentalize, like, okay, these are the overshare friends that also have a lot going on and will be accountable for each other. And these are the friends that are just like, I don't want to hear that crap at all. Get that?
Right.
that's not what I signed up for when I agreed to be.
I think that's something I can finesse, because I think there were a couple of brief phases where in bursts I would do this like verbal diarrhea, just dump it on a friend or two, but then I would feel either they were overwhelmed and or I would feel like, oh, like that was not like, I don't know.
Oh, dude, yeah, that's the worst, when you're like, oh no, I was not. As soon as you do it, and then do you think comedy has helped you to talk about it more? Like, are you more open about it in the past year since you started doing comedy, or what have you seen in reflection with that?
I think only as of super recently. I was very afraid and reluctant to open up on stage. I think for the first like 8-9 months of this year I've done comedy, it wasn't really about mental health, more so it was just getting like my footing right on stage.
Yeah.
And telling very it was one of two things, either like hacky kind of wordplay jokes or short like kind of jokes with like not too much depth. And then if I was to tell a bit of substance, it would be about my distant past.
Okay.
And then I think like over time, like the timeline of my bits would move forward, but it was like a decade behind.
Okay, so it would be like, I get it. So it's like, as you started, it's stuff that's so far removed from you that you can feel like you're talking about almost a different person. And now it's getting closer and closer and closer to like, okay, this is what's going on with me today. Interesting. Did comedy help you to talk to people off stage about it? Like, did you feel more open and comfortable? Because when I started doing stand up, I feel like I'm a way less reserved person emotionally than I was. And like, I mean, and I think this came from like having a lot of repressed issues and a lot of stuff going on with me, and like growing up where I grew up, and just like relationships that I had. And then I started doing comedy and just feeling more and more comfortable to talk about this openly. Like my brother can't believe that I have a podcast about our dad being dead. He's like, that is not how he grieves at all. So he supports what I do, but he's just like, I can't imagine it. And I think that doing stand-up is why I can do this type of thing, like being in the open book and not really caring what people think.
Yeah, and it's I have the same experience where stand up has liberated me to speak what is on my mind in person.
Yeah.
Especially because on stage as a beginner, there's a or all the time, I don't know, there's somewhat of an obligation to at some point make people laugh.
Yes.
Off stage, it's just talk like
Yeah. Agreed.
Grieving productively. What can you talk about? What inspired the second part of that title, the productively aspect?
Well, it's a mix of just like, I don't know, man. I think grief is like everybody goes through it, and there's a lot of times where grief feels absolutely uncontrollable. And the worst part was like when I was grieving over stuff, I felt like I wasn't doing anything, and that made me feel even worse. Like, so I was like, well, if I'm gonna feel bad about this and I am going to miss my dad so much, I should at least be doing something that could help other people, or at least be something that's funny or something that my dad would be proud of. So like I have like one of the jokes that's close to the end. It's like part of the, like I literally say I want to use my grief productively. And then when I was writing that joke and I said that phrase, I had just riffed it on stage. I was just like, that's what I need to do. I was like, I need to start being productive. And that's what's important to me, man. And not everybody can do it, but I didn't want, when this was all said and done, for me to look back and be like, man, that's not what my dad would have wanted me to do. Like he would have wanted me to do something positive with his passing, because he was such a positive guy. And so that's why it's important to me, man. It's where the productively thing comes from, is I think there's no right or wrong way to grieve, but for me, the right way to do it for me was to put a bunch of content out there and to try to connect this community of people that are feeling sad all the time, and trying to be like, hey, it's going to be okay. It's going to get better. We can laugh about these things that people tell you can't laugh about, but the people that are telling us you can't laugh about it haven't gone through it. So it's like that type of like connectivity is what I was searching for with the title of the special.
Definitely. I think I've seen the comments and the responses, and I think that's precisely what you're doing. You're reaching out and connecting to this community, and hopefully, or definitely, like we as a community can introspect on grieving productively as well. I think
that's what I hope, man. It's and that's been the best part, is there's I want to get some more eyes on it, but I can't be disappointed in the number of views I've had, and I definitely can't be disappointed in the response I've gotten. I've had a nonprofit reach out to me, and we're in discussions to do some cool stuff that I think would be pretty neat. And I've had all this positive feedback from comedians and just random people that have seen it that are just like, man, this is really awesome and different, and help them. And I don't know, it's the best comment I've gotten is like, it'll make you, it's like people like, yeah, it's really emotional, it'll make you cry. And then also people being like, it's also legitimately hilarious. And that's what I want. Yes. People crying while laughing is like the exact response that I want for this special.
Definitely. And that's, that is absolutely what happened. It happened for me, and I watched it twice.
Thanks, man.
Definitely. The impact that this made, and its very unique format, really left an amazing sort of imprint on my mind.
Thanks, man. That really means a lot to hear. Yeah. So thank you.
Could you talk about when you were putting the special together, maybe just like managing the workload in terms of the editing, the YouTube stuff, and then also if you had other stuff going on, maybe like mics, whether they're online and whatnot?
Yeah, I was, so I think I finished all the filming portions by July. And then over the course of, I probably could have finished editing it in a month. But I knew that wasn't good for my mental health, because it's tough to hear the same jokes over and over, reminding you that your dad's passing away while you're editing over and over and over again. And then at the end, I use photos and I use a clip from my dad getting on stage with me. So to me, it was all about not just managing the physical workload as much as it was me managing the emotional workload for this special. It was important for me to be the only person working on this. Like, I wanted to do all the editing. I wanted to do all the producing. I wanted to do all the sound editing, all the recording, obviously all the writing, all the like, I wanted to do all of that. So I just divvied it up with being like, I will wake up. I told myself, only edit when you want to edit, like when you're feeling it. So it didn't become laborious. So there'd be some days where I didn't edit at all. And the next day I would edit for 2 hours, and then I would feel bad, and I would have to hop on a Zoom mic and do 2 or 3 Zoom mics, and then maybe edit again at the end. So it was mainly about like, all right, don't lose your mind making this. That's not the point of what's going on. And the other thing that helped is when I edited the first 12 minutes of it, I had a group of friends that I sent it to and was like, I need you to watch this and tell me what you think going forward, because I said it's early enough to change it and not be furious. And they gave me some positive feedback. So it was mostly just like balancing like my day job at the time, which was online, video editing, and just making sure that I wasn't emotionally overloading myself and like getting too depressed and too sad. So it was like hanging out with friends, family, just like whenever I could, doing Zoom comedy stuff, dating stuff, all that stuff, just stuff to try to make me happy, to balance out like hours sitting in front of a laptop in my room,
Right.
not moving. So that's how I tried to balance it out, was to just only do it when I wanted to do it, because then I would have no excuse like, oh, I'm making myself do this, I'm going to just erase it.
Definitely. Yeah. I if I ever make a special, I will keep balance in mind for sure. What was it like, sort of the days coming up to you kind of publishing it to YouTube and the days shortly after?
I was terrified, man, because like I am someone who, if I don't have an end date, it doesn't get done. Like, that's just how I am. Like, I would have taken my time editing. So I think like 3 weeks beforehand is when I was like, it's coming out October, whatever freaking day I said it was coming out. And when I said that, it got very real to me about like, this is going to be out. Like, I know what people can say on the internet. Like, I was like, I'm going to put this in our stand-up community on Reddit. So I know there's going to probably be some negative stuff coming. You know what I mean? I was just prepped myself. Like, it's a possibility people could hate this, and you're not ever going to be able to get on Reddit again, because you're going to have all these notifications, and leading up to it was really scary. And then I was going to release it at like 5 p.m. on the Friday, and I just couldn't sleep that Friday morning. It was like 3 a.m, and I just released it. I was just like, it's out there. I'll make a post tomorrow. But I was like, I knew I would be up all night waiting. And then as soon as it was released, and the first couple people watched it, like the first person telling me that was awesome, that's it. And I felt immediately better. And I think like the tides could change. We could have like a Trump election situation where we're counting in the mail-in views, and it immediately goes from people liking it to hating it, and I would still feel fine. Like, I would still like, I'm proud of it enough now where I've got enough pride in it that if the opinion shifted on my special, it would be okay. But dude, it's nerve-wracking releasing stuff. I don't know if you've ever released like anything like I'm someone that freaks out if it's a small stand-up clip, or if I have to self-promote, I just get in my own head. So this was just like, oh man, this is going to be brutal. And then as soon as it was out, it was like, it's done. Like, I'm done.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to manage my, I guess, subsequent, or not so much subsequent, a little bit of subsequent anxiety and some anxiety going into it. I'm trying to kind of manage my mind, body kind of energy and its relationship with any level of, like you said, self-promotion. If I put out a small clip versus something longer, that's, I kind of want to get tougher in some ways.
Yeah.
Like, and the reason is just so I can like get through the day to day more productively. I think it's reassuring to hear that there is a level of relief and feeling better just by getting it sort of out there. And
if you release it and you don't like it, like I've released a bunch of videos on YouTube that my first year or two doing comedy, and at the time it was good for me. Like, I was like, oh, I'm proud of this. But now that I'm 5.5 years, I went back and was just like, okay, I've done this joke better. I've released it in a better way, and I just hide it. I don't get rid of it. I just switch the YouTube video to private, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah, there's still these little functions on YouTube that I haven't explored yet, and I think like you said, this tool of hiding, like it's subtle, but it helps.
Yeah, putting stuff unlisted,
Right.
and then like releasing something and putting it unlisted, and then just sending it to people whose opinion you want on it. Because dude, it's just something cathartic, even if it's not public, about it just being on the internet. Like there's just something, a mental thing where it's like it's on there at any moment. I can send it to someone that wants to see it. Like,
Gotcha.
like if you're trying to submit to festivals and stuff, and you don't want your 5-minute clip to be out there because you're insecure, you can set it to unlisted, and the only people that can watch it are people that you've sent the link to.
Gotcha. That is perfect and very sound advice. I will do just that. Like, moving forward. Like, I've just never. Yeah, these little. I'm like tackling stand up in this, like, I don't know if this is the right phrase, but deductive reasoning. Like I'll just try something, and if it flops, then like I don't know. I just like.
Yeah, that's how you're supposed to do it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah.
You're doing it the exact right way. Is you do something that you think is funny or unique and different and fun, and if people don't like it, you have two options. You can either go the route of very self-assured, like this is the type of thing that I want to do. This might not be my crowd. I'm going to adjust and double down. Or you can do the route, which is what I do, which I think you're doing, which is just like, all right, if I want this to work, what do I have to change to make this work? Or just accepting like, yeah, this thing didn't work. Because that's the thing, man, is it's okay for a joke not to work. Yeah, it feels like it's the end of the world. It's not. It's okay for the joke to bomb, and you put it back in your notebook. And because there's sometimes where you're just like, this bombed because I'm not a good enough comedian yet to do this. I've had plenty of ideas that, dude, I had jokes that the premise I had my first year in comedy, I tried it once. It bombed so hard. I knew the idea was funny though, and I put it away. And then 2.5 years later, I was able to turn it into a joke. So saving all your old premises is very, very important. Like a lot of the material that I've been doing on Zoom mics and stuff is stuff that like, because I always try to have new stuff on Zoom mics, is it stuff that it's like, okay, this is something that I did forever ago and did not work at all. So now that there's the low stakes of Zoom mics, right, we can try it out. So you're the way you're doing it is correct, is trying it. And if it doesn't work, who cares?
No, thank you. Yeah. And I think that it's my first 4 to 6 months, I was really shy and reluctant to, I guess, ask for any type of feedback or help or assistance. But I noticed that as I seek out resources, especially since everything is online, because of this pandemic, like seeking out resources, these Zoom mics really, I think, get to the core of the writing, and really listening to the feedback to kind of streamline, my process has been helpful.
I agree. And I like that the part about Zoom that I like so much is if I have an idea, if I have an idea for a joke right now during this podcast, I'm going to do a Zoom mic. I could just hop on one almost as soon as we get off this, like the immediacy of not having to leave my room. And I think it's just a great supplement, right? Like you're trying all these new jokes online where there's almost no stakes. And then when they're refined just a little bit, you can go put the finishing touches on it in front of a live crowd, which I think is pretty cool.
Precisely. Definitely.
Let me see if I can find this. So when I first did Zoom mics, it was all like blowing me away. Like I was like, this is insane. I felt like I was seeing crazy people, every single day, just like absolute, people doing like the craziest stuff. And one of the first things that I saw on a Zoom open mic, I screenshotted because I was like, I can't believe this is happening. And it was this.
That's me.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
It was one of the first Zoom mics I did, and it is Mudit doing like soccer comedy, and I literally was on my phone in the car and I screenshotted it, and I was like, I sent it to like a couple of my comedian friends who now do Zoom. I sent it to Nick Dees, who's doing Zoom now, who I know you've done stuff, like he's been on some of the shows, and Jake Snyder, and I was like, guys, you got to get on Zoom show. It's crazy. There's this guy that he just plays soccer while he's doing comedy. And then the next time I saw you were just doing regular stand-up. So I was like, but I didn't know. I was just like, I thought that was what Zoom comedy was. It's because I saw you and a couple other people doing characters. And I was just like, what have I gotten myself into?
That's the thing. I think when Zoom started, there was just no, the judgment didn't seep in yet because it was the first time this was happening. And
Yep.
I felt I was naive, and maybe I'll bring it back now that you brought it up. Like, it was just, I think it wasn't until I got a couple of roasts here and there, like, oh, maybe I can hack my way out of this set by juggling something, like it's a couple, roasts here and there. And then I stopped it. So that sort of explains why that was
Yeah, I
kind of
just remember I saw it and was just like, because I mean, there's crazy people at open mics, but also the internet's crazy. So I was like, I watched it. I was like, yep, this is the future comedy. And people just, because I was just like, okay. And it's not even that I thought it wasn't funny. I was just like, this is just nuts. Like,
Yeah.
this is crazy that this is what people are doing. And I saw a bunch of people doing it. I think that as it's gone on and people have noticed it's more the new normal, I think people are less experimental than they were at the beginning of it. Like, it is more and more. I feel like when we go to mics now, like we'll do like Daniel Flores' mic, and there'll be 14 people on it, and it's all just people doing jokes. It is literally like it. But I felt like 5 or 6 months ago, you would go to a mic and it would be like a third of the people are screen sharing. You got like 6 people doing characters, and then you had a few people that are just doing jokes, and it was like way more experimental. And then people were like, no, we should probably use this more productively, and because shows are not coming back.
Yeah, no, it's a really good and important observation, because I think like there are distinguishing lines between stand up and, say, maybe like an open-ended talent show with
but it's okay. I think that experimentation is important. I enjoyed watching it because because you've been to open mic. Sometimes it's hard to sit through 20 comics doing material, but when sometimes it's broken up with the person doing something that is legit insane, it is really fun. So I've got those pictures of you doing soccer on my phone, and I literally have like a thing in my phone that the album is titled "Crazy People on Zoom," and and you are the first picture in it. So that I think it was my first Zoom mic, or one of the first ones, and I was like, oh my goodness.
Yes, I am the trailblazer of.
You did of that.
Oh, that is awesome. Yeah, actually, so I have a question, just as a newer comic. I don't think I've asked this to any seasoned comedian, but like I find it actually tough, maybe marketing comedy shows, whether it's an open mic or a show with a stacked lineup. And it's not even necessarily me marketing it, just in general. It's like I have an affinity towards mixed mics or mixed shows with like mixed art forms, because the audience seems to feel fresher when you've got a comedy act and then something else. Like but then I don't know, how do you feel about that? Like what's your take?
I think they're both like important to do. It's like weird, it's like I feel like you make more changes to your jokes when you are doing just comedy, because people are less into it, and they're more bored, and there's more comedy you have to compete against. It makes you have to, like, your jokes have to be tighter.
Yeah, they
have to be better. You have to impress more people. When it's a mixed mic, like I did one last night, like the Monday open mic or something, and that was the first one I've done that had like poetry and music and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was incredibly long, and there were comics on it, but there was also like a lot of music and a lot of poetry, and I felt like my jokes worked better there because they weren't so overwhelmed. But I don't necessarily know how productive it was. It just felt like it was a good set.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but in real life, it's weird, because in real life you'll have more of, if you're doing like a mixed show, like I've opened for bands before, or I've been on a show with music and stuff like that, there's also the possibility that people view you as an interruption to the music. And they're way more against, like, music is really hard to follow. So like every time I've done, like, opening for a band can be really hard, but if it's like, hey, if a band is like, hey, we got 3 bands playing, we want you to do comedy in between the bands, it is miserable. It is not fun to do. Audiences are usually drunk. They're just kind of hanging out. They don't really care about the comedy, or they'll get to the show late if you're going up in front of them. But it all depends. On Zoom, the mixed ones are pretty fun. And in real life, they can be kind of fun if you're willing to, like, not stick to the script. Like I did one, like I've done a music open mic before where I was like, hey, it's like, who wants to just kind of jam behind me while I tell these jokes? And I've done that 2 or 3 times, and that's pretty fun because it's not, it's just fun. It does not productive, but it's a good time.
Right.
It's like, because I'm not gonna do these jokes with a band behind me, and I was like, all right, I'll try these one-liners that I have, and it's just, you guys just play like a smooth
Gotcha.
jazz line behind me, and that's pretty fun.
Okay, yeah, because as a beginner, like they were super gratifying. Like the mixed mics were my go-to as a beginner, just to feel better about being an open mic comic. Like it was, and I thought the entire comedian community was just like missing out, or just like what are you guys doing? These mixed mics are so like heartwarming. and
yeah,
like,
they're very different.
Right.
It's definitely a different vibe, and I think they are important to try and to do. Like mixed shows are how I got good at doing crowd work. Like I would do, because at those shows, like I did this weekly show in Richmond for this guy named Boston John, and I've told this on like a bunch of different podcasts, and like he wanted me to do 15 to 30 minutes every week at this show, and I told him I will do 15 to 30 minutes every week at this show if you're okay with me only trying crowd work. So there would be like, so it's like, I was like, all right, I'll do crowd work. These people are here to watch bands, but if I'm talking to them, they'll be a little more engaged, which is true. And it was the same crowd each week. So I couldn't ask the same questions each week. Like it's the same people coming back. And then if they don't like me one week, it's fine, because they get to listen to music afterwards. Like I haven't ruined the entire show. So they can be important for productive things. But in general, for the way that I work, I would prefer to be like the show is just comedy. That's all I want is comedy, because poetry can ruin a comedy show. It can, dude, I have followed poets talking about some things that are truly traumatic. And it's like, how am I supposed to follow your story about the worst that's ever happened to you? Now people are crying, and I have to just do jokes about, like, I have to do sex jokes now. Great. Thank you.
Definitely. No, I hear you. Yeah. But that makes perfect sense, because ultimately the jokes are getting tighter and more refined in comedy centric mics. And that is the core of the game. Well, awesome. Winston, this has been truly amazing. Again, viewers, I don't know what you're doing if you haven't YouTube searched Grieving Productively by now. And even if you have, do it again. Yes, please watch Winston's special.
Please do.
Yes. Awesome. I have your I have
yeah, you did a great job. You got everything up there, man.
Yes.
You did an excellent job. Yeah, check that out. And if you like the special and you want to hear more comedy about grief and loss, check out Dead Dad Comedy Pod on Apple Podcasts and Google Play Music and Spotify. And the whole premise of that is me and my co-host both lost our dads to the same thing in different ways. And it's us talking about our journey through grief. And then sporadically, like every other episode, we'll have a guest who has gone through something traumatic or works in the death industry. Like we've had a hospital chaplain come in. We've had a comedian who is used to be a funeral director. But everyone we interview has either done comedy or is doing comedy. And so we're able to talk about these things and make fun of how weird and crazy they are. So if you like Grieving Productively, you'll love Dead Dad Comedy Pod. But dude, thanks so much for having me. This was really fun.
Definitely. And thank you so much, Winston, for the opportunity to talk about this.
Anytime, man. This was great.